All right, joining us now is James Walton, and he is with the Prepper Broadcasting Network. And I think it's always time to talk about prepping, but no time more so than right now, as we can see a lot of problems on the horizon. And let's talk a little bit first. Thank you. Welcome, James. Tell us a little bit about what the Broadcasting Network is and what you have there.
Right. Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me on, sir. I appreciate the opportunity.
Sure.
And the Prepper Broadcasting Network is where are we at? 2026. So it's every bit of almost 20 years old now.
Oh, wow.
Podcast network it's been in the shadows for many, many years, man. It
Yeah.
was started by a guy named Glenn Martin in Idaho. And when he jumped out in 2018, I jumped in as owner. And now we are a 15 host podcast network. We have, I mean, hosts from all over the country that do shows on preparedness, on guns, on prepping, on politics, on, all kinds of different things. And I don't know if there's anything like it out there, to be quite honest with you. We're on daily. We do about 4 shows per day. I go live a lot on there myself.
Mm-hmm.
But and we also have like I said, we have about an 18-year-old archive that pulls from just some of the prepping greats. We have interviews with all the sort of, 1 second after authors. Wesley Rawls is of the world, and
Sure.
a lot of
Yeah.
the big name preppers from back in the day. We have a whole collection of Rick Austin from Doomsday Preppers podcasts. We got quite the archive, and we run that older stuff on each weekday. We run sort of an archived show because we
That's
have
great.
theme days on the weekdays. But yeah, essentially tons of prepping and uh, homesteading and self-reliance podcasts, and we also have an audio drama, and we even run some late night AM radio from back in the day too.
Let's talk a little bit about that audio drama. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So one of our hosts, Sarah Hathaway, started wrote rather a 9 book series called the Changing Earth series, and it's basically the big earthquake that cracks the world in pieces,
Mm.
and everything that once worked doesn't work. You know what I mean? So the
Mm-hmm.
main natural disaster is the earthquake, but that is quickly followed by humans behaving badly. You know what I mean? In the worst possible ways, and
Sure.
America sort of reshuffling into tribal sort of, a piece of the government trying to stay together, a military aspect, and of course a lot of sort of Raider-esque party. And we took that whole book series. Well, she took that whole book series and adapted it to basically lines in an audio drama with sound effects and the whole 9 yards, man. And we all voice parts in the audio drama. So, if you listen to the like people who really listen to PBN a lot, they listen to the audio drama and they can go, "Oh, that's so and so, and there's Jordan, there's James, there's Dave Jones," and they hear us all.
That's
But
great.
I'll tell you, some of the hosts, man, they got some pretty interesting skills. They do Russian accents, and they do, sometimes it's hard to recognize their voices, but it's a
That's
great
great.
time. We're
That's great.
5 seasons in.
Well,
Five seasons,
I think it's
crazy.
really important when we do dramas because, and of course, the government does as well. They do a lot of prepping of us for what they've got coming up. They do a
Good
lot of,
point.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think when we see something acted out, it has a different kind of effect than if we just tell you straight off like a didactic thing. Well, this is what this is and so forth. Or even with a documentary, we start to put something together. If you do something in a dramatized way, it really does sink in differently to people. So I think it's a pretty valuable thing. Let's talk a little bit about when you contacted me. You said there's some issues. We look at prepping. You refer to something as the 100-year amnesia. What do you mean by the 100-year amnesia?
Yeah. So when I got started prepping, I, I had no idea what I was doing with anything in terms of like manhood whatsoever. I was a father, I was a husband, brand new father. We had a
Uh-huh.
big nasty hurricane, and that big nasty hurricane really kind of, oh man, it was one of those sort of aha moments. And after getting into prepping, and doing things like splitting wood and shooting bows and arrows, and you learning about wild food and foraging and all that kind of stuff, herbal medicine, herbal remedies, all this stuff starts pouring in. I was a chef in a past life, so I already had sort of this tether to cooking and ancient cooking and that kind of stuff, um, it just came very apparent to me like we forgot everything. How did we forget? What the real question was, how did we forget so much so fast?
Yeah.
You know, it was like we literally hit our head
Oh,
because
I
a
agree.
hundred years ago, talking about herbal remedies was like, oh yeah, like I got jars full of potions in the other room in case you get a headache, in case you get a chest cold, in case you get. And then by the time I'm born in the late '80s, nobody knew anything. I
Yeah.
mean, even my grandmother had like a aloe plant in the window, and that was her extent of knowledge in terms of that stuff. So it really was sort of like this rush of convenience and comfort that just wiped our memories of what was probably what thousands of years of ingenuity and understanding of the planet that we just gave up on for like Campbell's canned soup. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think
It's
it's
wild.
analogous to
So
what's
I just
going
always
on.
refer to it as that, the 100-year amnesia.
I agree. I think it's analogous to what's going on with AI right now, and where people see this going. It's very easy if you make something easy. It's like the welfare state. It's another analogy I would say. If you make things very easy for people, you can lure them into a very passive existence where they become helpless. And I think that is a big part of the design. And I think that's happening very rapidly. We see that happening with AI. I mean, even to go back to some of the the fact that we got the maps on our phones that take us everywhere. They used to have cabbie drivers in London who would do the knowledge, and they would drive around on all these short little streets that are constantly changing names,
Yeah.
and they would memorize that, and they could actually see that a certain part of their brain got larger, physically larger because of that, and then it shrinked when they stopped using that, and they just started using GPS devices on their phones. I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of
Imagine if
it.
that was the whole goal, right?
Yeah.
Just to shrink the brain size down to something nice and manageable, less rebellious, you know?
That's right.
That's a
Yeah,
frightening
here, have
thought.
some fluoride and don't worry
Yeah,
about anything. We'll
exactly.
take care of it for you. That's right.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah,
talk
we are the
about
product of that.
when we talk about self-reliance, what does that mean today? What is modern self-reliance?
Well, because of that, well, the cool thing about self-reliance, I think, is because of what we just talked about, like
Hmm.
it doesn't take a lot to make a big change, right?
Hmm.
Like it doesn't take a lot to feel really self-reliant. One of the biggest moves that we ever made, we had to fight for this. But when we started keeping chickens, we live in Richmond City. Okay. When we
Hmm.
started keeping chickens and I realized that we were producing a viable protein source in the backyard that was to some degree renewable. You
Hmm.
know what I mean?
Hmm.
Some degree it was standing on its own 2 feet and we were producing that source of protein. And to me, that was like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. You know what I mean? Now we are definitely getting somewhere because we got protein. Before then, it's all the freeze dried food and the rice and beans and that kind of stuff. But I think through power, I think through water, I think through food. Uh, those three things to me really seem to be well. You know what? In food, I should also say the ability to cook from scratch. I
Mm.
think that's another big one that people overlook in terms of self reliance. Like that's a huge one that I just took for granted for a long time because of my training. I just,
Hmm.
when you can do something and do it sort of at will, it's one of those things you take it for granted. But you can really control your life uh, just through having some control, not even a giant solar array and all the power that you need coming from the sun, but just having a backup plan for power. I think really speaks to self-reliance. When the power goes out, you're not all of a sudden, at the hands or at the feet of some power company or whatever else the situation is, a storm, down power lines, all that. And
Hmm.
I think we can make big strides as people today because we are so dependent already and we are like built into the dependence.
Yeah, and just a little bit is a huge change, right? If you've only got two
It
things and
really
you add
is.
another one, you've increased by 50%. So that's an encouraging thing, and it's a very empowering thing. You get that feeling, and I know what you're talking about with the chickens. We went through that as well. We started having chickens, and then Karen started a garden, and it's like, this is great, and the food is so much better too. That was the other thing about it. It's just so much better than
Oh,
anything we could
most
get.
certainly.
Yeah, yeah.
Most
That's
certainly. Yeah,
that's a very
yeah.
important thing.
There are
Por-
definitely small changes that you can make in
Mhm.
your life to be not only on the road to self-sufficiency, but also to be able to One of the crazy things that's changed lately is the state of the news. Like the state of the news in and of itself is a depression,
That's
and
right.
I don't know if people have recognized it as much. I recognized it a lot because I used to spend all my time on prepper websites like
Hmm.
10 years ago, always on prepper websites. The economy's falling, a pandemic is coming, war is happening, the political world or civil unrest is coming, all this kind of stuff that used to really just be the core of prepper news. And now it's everybody's news.
Yeah.
And the big difference is I was prepping. So I would get hit with this wave of news by choice, feel the anxiety, feel the rush, all that stuff. But I'd say, you know what? All right, but we got our food straightened out. We're working on our power, we're working on this, we're working on that. What the average person, I think, doesn't understand is that they're getting pelted every single day by like basically doomer news.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
the big difference is they're not taking any steps to mitigate it. I don't even know if they know how to mitigate it. I don't even if they know that they need to mitigate it.
That's
But I
right.
think it is having an effect on people. I do. I think the overall like zeitgeist has changed so much from what day-to-day news consumption does that people feel largely hopeless. I mean, that's what I see, especially from a lot of young people. It's sort of like a nothing works. It's all coming down, which is
I
really
agree.
not the case,
Yeah.
but it's just the state of the news right now.
Well, it's
I
the sort
know.
of thing when we look at something that is a bad trend, I think we have to talk about that and we need to face up to it. We don't want to just be Pollyanna and say, oh, everything's just fine. Don't worry about it. But at the same time, as you point out, there has to be some kind of sense that there is an outlet, that there is something that you can do about it. When I look at politics, I really don't see any solutions out there. But that's one of the reasons why when I talk about the news, I also talk about Christ, because that is the ultimate prepping that we have, I think. But
Oh
there
yeah.
are things, certainly, we never know what's going to happen in terms of a natural disaster, in terms of a government made disaster, or some kind of a deliberate attack or plot by our government. So we should always be aware of that. And that should drive us to seek out solutions. One of the reasons why I wanted to have you on. I think it's important to have, to just not look at the problem only, but to try to find some solutions. And so there are some things that we can do on our own. And I think that's something that you're addressing there at the Pepper Broadcasting Network. I think that's really important.
And nobody's out of target. Like everybody can have an effect from cities all the way to the most rural areas. Big
Hmm.
misconception is always like, what am I going to do? I'm right here in the city, I'm in the suburbs or whatever the situation is. But the reality is little things go a long way. Anything is better than nothing. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people get bogged down by the fact that they don't have much money or they don't have the time or they're not in the right place to prepare. And then they find themselves basically not doing anything. Another storm hits, another inconvenience, another,
Hmm.
whatever the situation is. Because now, in all honesty, now it's easier to prepare than ever. There are so many companies, there are so many accessible preps that you could never get your hands on 10 years ago that are just they're everywhere. Medical kits are better. You can buy jackeries at Best Buy, you know what I mean? Keep your
Hmm.
lights on. Like a lot of stuff is really accessible. Walmart even sells emergency food, I think.
And I think it really helped in that sense. The silver lining of everything that happened in 2020, we saw things being locked down, supply chains being broken. It made it real for a lot of people, I think. And so, just like we see with homeschooling, there's been a big move towards homeschooling because people were able to see better what was actually happening in their child's classroom. We're also now looking at the insanity of what happened. And of course, it's coming back again. I just saw an article about the fact that toilet paper is getting in short supply because of Trump's war against Canada. So I guess every time he comes in, it's
Wow, that was
excrement hits
fast.
excrement hits the fan scenario. I guess every time he comes in, we're out of toilet paper 6 years ago, and here we are, deja vu again. So
You bring up a good point, though. I think that one of the things that preppers get a bad name for is stockpiling. Um, and I think we got to rewrite the sort of the mentality around stockpiling,
hmm.
because I think there is a point where stockpiling gets crazy, but if there's stores that exist like Sam's Club and Costco that are frequented by Americans by the millions, if not tens or hundreds of millions,
Hmm.
then like this is not. stockpiling, this is just something that works. You know,
Yeah.
you buy 2 cases of toilet paper for $25 each.
Hmm.
You never think about it. You know what I mean?
That's
And then
right.
when one goes away, you buy another one to sit on top of the old one and then or underneath of the old one. And you know, it's just one of these things where and this mentality is what makes keeps me from going insane.
Hmm.
And I imagine a lot of people are on some kind of antidepressant because they're living one can at a time and reading headlines like that. Oh, here comes the toilet paper fist fights again. So I guess I better buy some toilet paper tonight, you know?
Yeah,
When
run
it
out
can
right now and get
things
it.
like yeah, exactly. Yeah, and things like that can just be easily, just easily. You know, another thing that we keep on hand all the time is like the dreaded va- phthalate filled plastic bottles of water. You know what I mean? We
Hmm.
always have them.
Hmm.
And despite them getting a bad name, because you know what's worse than plastic bottled water? No water. Or you know what I mean? Or you get a message like they did in Minnesota a couple weeks ago, which was the water system's been hacked, and we think it might have been hacked by Iran, who we're going to war with right now.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I mean? And now you're
that's
looking at
right.
the tap going, oh, well, okay, well, I guess we got to deal with that.
Well, we
You
just
know,
have a long
just little
list of
things.
suspects, don't we? I mean, when we see something
Yeah,
going down, it's either incompetence or malevolence. And if it's malevolence, we got a long list of usual suspects when you go down that list as well. But
that is a good point.
yeah, it's one of the things that Jack Lawson, who I've talked to many times, Jack Lawson books. He talks about the fact just get started, get a couple of cans, for cheap, and put them under your bed if you don't have a place to put them. It's just taking that initial little bit of a step. But I think
Yeah.
another important part of it is, prepping in terms of like you're talking about, being able to, grow vegetables or have chickens or something like prepping in terms of skills and prepping in terms of relationships, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, now you're getting into so the stockpile mitigation kind of fights against the day-to-day headlines, the day-to-day stresses of life, the what I call the personal apocalypses that occur, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you lose your job.
Mm-hmm.
Lost the job, honey, we're in trouble. But you know what? We got food because we stored food. We've got, other things, stockpiled paper goods, that kind of stuff. So we're not completely in the red right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
We don't got to go out and drop $200, $300 this week on groceries if we don't have to. But then what you're talking about now, I look at as sort of the next step, which is the moment you realize that prepping, homesteading, urban homesteading really is what we're talking about, just creates a much better life. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's an improvement of your lifestyle. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a person on earth that doesn't want to walk out back into a yard and clip basil and pick fresh fruits and vegetables and go to the chicken coop and grab their fresh eggs and come in the house and make breakfast, lunch, and dinner with it.
That's
And
right.
it's one of those things that's a no-brainer. But in all honesty, like I think our community is one of the prepping and homesteading communities are the ones that really push people to this better life, which is kind
Uh-huh.
of ironic. You know what I mean? Like we're the ones that do it and show people how to do it and tell people why they should do it.
I agree.
And unfortunately, it works better to scare them to death than to try to shake them and tell them, hey, it's going to be way cooler if you grow your own food and raise some chickens and have your own eggs. They don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? They'd much rather tell me the world's coming to an end and then I'll grow a garden and then I'll plant some
Yeah.
local trees that grow fruit consistently. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
it's the reality of it. I mean, it is an interesting thing, but motivating people's,
There's a
an
parallel there, I
interesting
think,
thing.
and that is, when I talk about homeschooling, again, it's another one of these things that changes your life, but in a much better way. You put a little bit of effort in, and now you've got a closer knit family. You've got kids that you can talk to. I think that, in the same way that we look at homeschooling, I think the same thing that you're talking about there in terms of homesteading is something that really speaks to innate natural needs that we have.
Yeah. Well, it all fits under that sort of self-reliant umbrella
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
I think it just really resonates with Americans. You know, I can't speak for other nationalities, but I think there's something innate about living in America, especially if you're born and raised here, where it's like there's a rebellious nature in you and there's a self-reliant nature in you. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if it comes from the founding documents and the principles, but there's just something about it resonates. You know what I mean? The more
That's
you
right.
can do for yourself, it's hard to get over the hump, because you're sort of based in the comfort and convenience of modern society. But when you get over that hump, you feel a feeling of like, this is what I'm supposed to do. You know what I mean? Like I remember splitting wood for the first time. Like you split wood with an axe and you're like immediately connected to something that's lost. You know what I mean? You're like,
That's right.
oh, this is a thing that we're supposed to do. Like we shouldn't have gave this up for a heat pump. I mean,
That's
the heat
right.
pump's great. We have one of those too, but
Yeah.
there's something about it. First time I shot a recurve bow was the same feeling. It was like, oh man, why did we stop doing this? It's just
Yeah.
weird things that we just stopped doing that. To your point, the homeschooling, same thing. That's the way
Hmm.
it was done,
That's
in
right.
America, especially in the West. Like you got schooled by mom or your siblings. So I think is touching them wires is more powerful than we give it credit.
I agree. I always used to look at the Amish and it's like, what in the world are they doing? I just didn't get it. But now I get it. I understand what they were doing. They cut it off at a certain period of time, not because they
Yeah.
thought that it was some kind of demonic thing to have this device or that device. They were very deliberate in terms of what they did and in trying to make sure that they did not become dependent on the outside world and become captured by the outside world. They want to have that kind of self-reliance where they could build the things themselves, grow the things themselves, and have everything they needed within their community. It's not that one person has to do everything, but they create a community that was going to be self-sufficient because they could see where things were headed. They could see it way before I could see it.
Yeah, yeah, I think it has a lot to do with that. I also think it has to do with like a stasis, like a literal human homeostasis. Like
Hmm.
this is there are certain things you can't take away from the human, or else you wind up with whatever massive percentage of the population is on antidepressant drugs. You know what
Hmm.
I mean?
I agree.
Because I just think gender related uh duties, they really fulfill you. Women get fulfilled by doing women things, men get fulfilled by doing traditional men things. And when the society, or I don't, I mean, I'm a fan of capitalism, but when capitalism winds up taking all the things that men are supposed to do and does it for them, it has an effect.
I
You know what I
agree.
mean? The
I agree.
world of too much comfort and convenience has an effect,
I
and it
agree.
takes something away from people that they need.
Yeah, I've interviewed David Bonson several times. He's got a book talking about the value of work and the fact that God created us to do work. I mean, work got more difficult after the fall, but we were created to do that. And so I think that is a key part of the innate desire to do these types of things and why it feels fulfilling when we learn how to do them or when we
Oh
engage
yeah.
in doing them. The passivity that is being pushed to us very, very rapidly. I think we're getting to the point now because things are changing so quickly. It's becoming kind of a lot more obvious to people how this stuff is taking us down. When you look at the massive advance in AI and how it is designed to take away so many different aspects and how it's taking away right now, taking away creative jobs from people. And but they aspire to pretty much take everything away from everybody, and they're open about it. And so when you look at that and you see how it makes people passive, you see that if you use this stuff, you don't get any sense of accomplishment when you do it. I mean, it can do
Nah.
when when I do artwork and things like that, it does a much better job of fixing my photos than I could do in Photoshop in a very long time. But it's just not satisfying. Actually, the poor quality stuff that I used to do was much more satisfying than if I give it to AI and just say, remove that person over there on the right. It just does it automatically for me and fills in a background. That's not a satisfying thing. There's only so much that you can get from the end result. The process is a big part of it, I think. And when you look at the kids and other people drawn into this thing in a kind of an AI psychosis, I think that's just another example of this. It's kind of a mental illness after we stop working with our hands and producing and fixing things, right?
100%. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Hmm.
You're given 24 hours, and your body affords you a certain amount of energy to deal with that 24 hours.
Hmm.
If you sit at a desk all day and you don't work out and you don't do any work with your hands and feet, of course you're insane by the end of the day. You know what I mean? It's like you're overflowing with some kind of energy that's created by your mind and body, and no outlet. We have four dogs, two
Hmm.
boys and four dogs. Our house is basically like what, not a sorority. What's the opposite? like
Fraternity.
that around
Yeah.
here. Fraternity, yeah, it's largely. My wife is a hockey player.
It's like
fun.
Animal House, right?
It is like
If you got
Animal
four
House,
dogs, they're going
literally.
to keep you busy and keep you moving, I'm sure. Yeah.
But if they're all pit bulls too, we love pit
Oh,
bulls. So like if you have a pit bull and you sit him on the couch all day, he'll be a menace by the end of the day. You
yeah.
know what I mean? And when I see people lashing out outside, I just see the same thing. I just see
Same with
someone
our
who
border
is,
collie. We got a border collie, and you keep him busy. He's a great dog. He's very smart. But if you don't keep him busy, the devil has work for idle hands,
yeah,
and he'll get in all
yeah.
kinds of. They get very destructive. Yeah.
When I see a purple-haired woman out there with a nose ring screaming at the ICE or at a police officer, at a just a person walking by trying to have you on a date, it's exactly what I see.
Yeah.
I see somebody who needs more stuff to do. I mean, you got too much energy in there. You were put on this earth to do something other than scream at people as they walk by, and you're not doing it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And these are the repercussions of not meeting, living to your fullest.
I agree.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and you can find that fullest in prepping. You really can. I mean, I think we have a lot of men listeners, but we have a lot of women listeners also, and
Hmm.
and they find a level of fulfillment in this stuff that is really surprising. And in fact, in 2020, I saw the intuition of women really take off. I mean, they were the first into the breach, it felt like to me, who are reaching out via email and were like, I don't like the way this is going, James. This like my husband seems to think it's going to blow over. I'm really nervous about it, type of thing. And I saw a lot of that. I saw even my own wife, who was, married to me,
Hmm.
but even she, her hairs sort of prickled up and she was talking to me about it and like, what are we going to do with this and this and this? So it was really interesting to see that sort of, aspect of women that you can only cover up so much. All this stuff you can only cover up so much with comfort and convenience, and
Hmm.
before long things get bad enough and it all comes back out. And
Hmm.
I think we're in some ways we're there. In some
And I
ways
think
people
it's
have
also,
seen enough.
being able, as you pointed out, being able to cook from scratch. You can't just go get stuff off the grocery shelf. And now people have an awareness of just how unhealthy the stuff you grab off the grocery shelf is, because they put in all kinds of adulterants in order to make the food move through the machines better. I mean, so you wind up eating the lubricants and all the rest of the
Yeah.
stuff that's there as well, not just the original food that was there. They really adulterate it over and over again. So there's an incentive now, for people to find their own natural ingredients out there, make their own bread in some ways. And sometimes you want to
Oh
make your
yeah.
own bread because you don't want the glyphosate that's being put into it, right? So you're looking for different alternatives, and you can't find them off the shelves. If you do find that kind of stuff, it's prohibitively expensive. So it's better to just do that kind of thing on your own and scratch. And I know that's the case with my wife. She's getting really interested in a lot of these healthier alternatives that you have to make for yourself.
Yeah. It's a way to go. It's
Yeah.
a skill for everyone. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? I know I just talked about gendered-based duties or whatever, but cooking really is. It's one of those things like filing taxes and budgeting that it really should be built into the school system because every person should know how to cook for themselves. You got to eat 3 times a day. Like the
Hmm.
idea that you have to eat arguably 2 or 3 times a day, and nobody like how many people start their life as an 18-year-old and know how to cook anything?
That's right.
You know what I mean? They have
That's
no
right.
idea how to cook food. Men are like, oh, I hope I meet a woman who can cook. Dude, what if you don't? Like, what's your long-term plan here?
Yeah.
It's one of those things that it can really set you on fire with self-reliance because all of a sudden you realize, even if I don't have a garden, I can go to a farmer's market. I
Hmm.
can go to a local butcher. I can get the best ingredients money can buy and cook whatever I want to cook every night of the week.
That's
And I
right.
also save tremendous amounts of money by not eating Chipotle all the time, which costs, $60 for a family of four for rice and beans,
Yeah, it's
which
amazing
we're
now what's happened to the price of fast food. And
really,
when we see what is happening now with Trump in terms of tariffs, I mean, this stuff broke last week, and as everybody's taking a look at it, the longer you look at it, the worse it looks, because
yeah,
we're not only harming the farmers who have a way to make this work in the long term, and it's the antithesis of everything that Trump has been saying he wants to do, right? He wants to put up walls and tariffs at the border to make sure that we are somehow completely self-sufficient within the political borders of the United States. And yet, what he's doing to the farmers and the ranchers is exactly the opposite. I mean, he's just hollowing them out. And his own imports are really an admission of that, I think. But people are concerned about it.
The imported beef situation you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as people are looking at some of the stuff that's been coming in, they just had a massive recall in the last couple of months of beef from Argentina, both in the United States and in China. Are these reliable, safe sources of food? Why can't I go down to my neighbors who have cows, and why can't they feed and finish their cows and slaughter their cows? The government comes after you when you do that. I mean, we saw that happen with Amos Miller, the Amish farmer who was up there. And there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be allowed to do that type of thing.
All that is regulation.
Yeah.
And I hope that someone in his administration is going to get in his ear and let him know that. I mean, it could literally be ignorance because, I mean, you're only one guy. You can only know so much about, and that dude knows a lot about a lot. But I don't, he's definitely not a pro-regulation president from what I've seen. So I could see if someone tells him what the real deal is, what's really going on, we could really cut the cost, which is getting around the government regulation that doesn't allow farmers to butcher their own meat and sell it. It's got to go through a packing facility or I don't know what exactly it is, but it has to go away and come back.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And you got to pay for that. So then I got to pay for that and you got to pay for that.
And the ranchers have been saying that is, they're taking the lion's share of the profit, when they do that. It would be far more efficient if we could have our food that is locally grown and processed locally. There's absolutely no reason why they need to prop up these quasi-monopolies, oligarchies or whatever, but that's exactly what they're doing. And when I look at Trump, it seems like, he'll talk about regulation, but really what he's looking at, I think, when you look at Doge and things like that, you have a reduction in the number of employees that are there, but you're not really reducing the regulations that are there. And if you keep those regulations in place, what I think they're expecting to do is to have a system of surveillance and automated enforcement where they can still keep those regulations there, but they just have fewer employees that they have. That's just my take on it, what I think is happening with it. I don't really see a sense that they want to free us up.
Yeah. Well, it's a weird thing because the one of the areas with Trump that always makes me nervous is the bottom line investment in the country, and this number that he seems really excited about talking about growing all the time, though we never see the fruits of whatever that number $1 trillion it is, right? In his first year, I think he was touting like we had $12 trillion in investments or something along those lines into the country, or 19, or I don't know what we did with it.
Yeah.
But I do know that most of it was AI, right? Or a big chunk of it was probably war in AI, if I had to guess. And I don't know why it didn't go towards the $40 trillion debt. I don't know what it went towards.
Yeah, that's what's really growing. The debt and the spending are growing, but not so much the jobs or the incomes, I think.
Yeah, that's what makes me worry about things like what you're talking about with a growing surveillance state, because you get a company like Flock in the president's ear and say, oh, yeah, we can cut all kinds of employees and just put our Flock cameras up everywhere and we'll have eyes on everything that's going on. Don't you worry.
That's right. Yeah. Send out a drone to arrest people, right? An armed drone. And I think that is coming. I mean, they're weaponizing and practicing that at the border. And of course, that's just going to continue to move in as they.
Well, they're in Atlanta,
Oh, yeah. Big time in Atlanta. That's
remote,
where they're.
I'm pretty sure they're remote, right? They're remote controlled dog robots patrolling Atlanta, Georgia.
And that's where Flock came from. So it's. Their headquarters. I don't know.
What a weird place, huh? Is that a Georgia's like a weird? I feel like there's a portal open in Georgia. Evil's just pouring out somewhere in that place.
Maybe it's Georgia Tech. I don't know. I was going to go to Georgia Tech at one point in time.
I feel like 20 years ago, I was like, we might need to move to Georgia. That is the place. And now I'm like, oh my God. Well, I used to feel the same way about North Carolina too, though. North Carolina seems to be crazy as of late.
Yeah. It's I've spent most of my life in North Carolina. We're in Tennessee now, but North Carolina was always this back and forth with Democrats typically in control, but with a Republican insurgents that was there. But they've had some really crazy stuff happening there. But when you look at Atlanta, the guy who created Flock, he's not that old. I mean, he's in his late 30s. and it's he and
Wow.
some buddies from Georgia Tech. And the crime was pretty bad in the inner city, they said. So they started coming up with some tech solutions. That's his story as to why they did that. But yeah, it's not the path that I want to see America go on. And it is really, we've seen with the approach that, and this has really been a bipartisan approach. I mean, certainly Biden used lawfare against Trump, and now he is returning the favor to all those
Oh, for
different
sure.
people. And when you look at what he did with the guy who's now his director of national intelligence, he used him to ferret out information from individuals. And I'm not supporting these individuals or anything that they did. What concerns me is the idea that you can use AI to go back and audit people. You can say, bring me the man
Yeah.
and I'll find the crime. That's a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, that's communist ideology, unfortunately.
That's
So,
right.
yeah, because we're all guilty at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
depending on who's behind the controls,
That's right. Well, yeah,
I've
there was
been
a
on
guy who
both
wrote a
sides of
book
it.
a few years ago. His name is Harvey Silverglate, and it was 3 felonies a day. He said the laws become so complex that most people don't know that they're committing, on average, about 3 felonies a day.
Mm.
And when you look at the things that
Well,
they charge people for as felonies, I think he's spot on, actually.
I could see it.
Yeah, I don't think
I
that's
mean,
an
I could definitely
exaggeration.
see it.
Hmm.
I think that you know, if anything like a revolution is to occur in the country, then food, water, power. You
That's
better
right.
have some stability in those categories. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? That's another
Hmm.
aspect of prepping. It's any big change, any sea change, any moment where protest is necessary and distribution is cut off.
Hmm.
Another thing that's necessary is being able to self-sustain. It's just one of those things, and there is a rebellious nature in the people of the United States, and they are only going to take so much. Um, but without that base level preparedness, like you can only hold out so long.
Let me
You know what
ask
I mean?
you about let me ask you about generators and things on it, because to me, I see that, and it's that's one of the issues in terms of fuel, and of course, a lot of people have talked about diesel and the fact that it's a much simpler fuel, and you can kind of approximate it, I guess, with certain household items, unlike gasoline. Of course, when I looked at it in terms of converting a diesel car that we had a few years ago, there was some really hazardous chemicals that you're not going to have sitting around on the shelf that you would also need to add to your diesel. I forget what it was, maybe benzene or something like that. But do you cover that on your prepper broadcasting? I mean, what are people talking about with fuel? Is it mainly just kind of focusing on solar and wind as a power supply?
I mean, there are methods that you can store gasoline for up to a year. I think if you had concerns about long-term fuel storage, that you would create a system probably a month. One of the best ways to do it is to create a month-to-month system based on 5-gallon gas cans or something along those lines, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you have the can, you have the tape with the month on it, and you fill up 12 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you keep them, obviously you use up what you use for the month for the generator for whatever things you want to use. If you're planning on powering a car, you're going to need much bigger containers,
Mm-hmm.
fueling the vehicle for a year. But you could definitely keep a generator running uh with that backup gas. And if you have to bleed, the thing about having the 12 cans is if you have to bleed into the next month to get through a disaster or subsequent months, then you have that on hand. But it can also help you with rotation. Now you
Mm-hmm.
have to put a product in there like a stay bill that you stir into the gasoline. It's cheap, but you
Mm-hmm.
stir it into the gasoline and it keeps oxidation from killing it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Within 6 months to a year's time, it'll be much less effective if you don't use the stay bill in it. So you can manage fuel in that way. There's a lot of generators nowadays, though, that are they're like 3 fuel generators.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use propane, you can use kerosene, you can use diesel, you can use gas. What's another one? Propane, butane, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are
Mm-hmm.
generators that take multi-fuel now, which I think is really cool because
Yeah,
then it gives you some options. You know
that's
what I mean?
great.
You can have 20-pound propane cans that you have for your grill
Mm-hmm.
that you can use to also keep the lights on, things like that. So there's a lot of options out there. I mean, the larger solar batteries, the larger, basically just big batteries that you
Mm-hmm.
attach to solar panels, they're incredibly effective for
Mm-hmm.
short-term power outage. I mean, really, really effective at turning lights on, turning TVs, routers on, bringing some level of normalcy back to the household while you wait to find out, all right, is this a 4-hour problem, a 12-hour problem, a 12-day problem, you know?
Yeah, we've been in a situation where we were without power for several days in North Carolina when a hurricane came through there. I wasn't really too worried about it because I'd grown up in Florida and we had hurricanes that happen all the time, but the soil is so different. In North Carolina, it rained for a very long time and we didn't have a lot of wind by the time it got there, but the soil was different and it didn't absorb all of that water like it does in Florida. And so what happened, we started having trees that had been around for over a century start falling in different places, taking down power lines. And it was really a domino effect, if you want to put it that way. And we were out for about a week, I guess, at that point in time. That was a difficult time. But the guy who's doing the recording today, Lance, is he was looking into, what was it, wood gasification that you were looking to? We had a listener who sent us a book about that. I really appreciate that. And it got him interested in looking into it. And in terms of fuel, it's going to keep your car going for a long time. You can actually run it on wood. So one of these things, so you can go out and get your fulfillment in terms of chopping and splitting wood. And then you can actually, with the right adaptations, you can run a car on that type of thing.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. We had a guy who was trying to build a methane system for something similar.
Mm-hmm.
I'm nervous of that stuff personally.
Yeah.
I'm not type A enough. I'm not type A. I'll blow myself up. You know what
That's
I mean?
right.
I'll make a mistake. So
right.
the gas thing is always no gasoline I can handle. Put a date on it, put a label on it. That's good. That's clear. Can't mess that up too much. But yeah. But there are, I mean, if you're willing to go head over heels in certain aspects of prepping, like you can get really self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I tend to stay away from that stuff just because I want people to feel like it's accessible.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be a scientist to
Sure.
to keep the lights on.
So when you do cover stuff, I mean, you got all these different hosts. Do they have different specialties, for example? I mean, are some of them kind of focused on food or what?
Yeah,
how's
I mean,
it kind of broken out?
Everybody's very capable,
Mm-hmm.
like all around very capable. But you know, Jordan is really sort of the master of the fiber work. She does a show called Phoenix Survival, and she knows how to turn fur into clothing. She can do it. She does it. She teaches people how to do it every year at prepper camp, and you know, that would be her kind of takeaway skill. We have a guy on the network. You guys would probably love to interview him. His name's Dave Jones, the NBC guy, and he's a nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare major from the Army, retired,
Mm-hmm.
who, you know what he knows about. So he's great. Sarah Hathaway, the author, you know, I think her superpower is not actually her writing. I think it's her self-defense. She has a really storied past in martial arts and a real passion for kidnapping and human trafficking. And she combines those two things.
Stopping those things.
Yeah, using one to stop the other. And it's really powerful. So,
wow.
yeah, I mean, across the board, you know, I'd say that each host is really capable in terms of all the categories of preparedness and homesteading. But some of them do have specialties, you know, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds very interesting. And again, it is the Prepper Broadcasting. It's not network, but it's prepperbroadcasting.com. Is that correct?
That's the website. Yes, sir. Prepperbroadcasting.com. We're also on iTunes, Spotify. Actually, Spotify is giving us a little trouble right now, but we will be on Spotify. We will be updating. We have tons of shows on Spotify, but we're just not updating right now.
Spotify is the only podcast place that has banned me, and they banned me a long time ago. And
really?
Yeah. I got banned during the COVID stuff. I was telling people
that?
the truth.
Yeah.
So
I know. We got thrown off
me.
YouTube for the same thing. We got thrown off YouTube
me too.
twice.
Yeah.
Once for COVID and once for the 2020 elections. They were not happy with that.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
You know how it goes.
Oh,
but yeah. We're Prepper Broadcasting Network. Just search it. But if you want to go direct to the website where all the podcasts update every day, that's prepperbroadcasting.com.
That's great. Well, James, it's great talking to you. Sounds like a great network and a great resource that's out there. And as you said, there is so much negative news. We don't want to just turn a blind eye to it. We don't want to be foolish about it. But we don't want to fixate on it either and not have a solution and to be productive about that. So I think it's where your network comes in. Sounds like a great service. Thank you so much for joining us. And giving us your perspective on that. And it's another great resource for people to look at, I think. PrepperBroadcasting.com. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at davidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. davidknightshow.com.